Hunters, welcome back to another Flusham and Dustin podcast. Tonight we have Ted on. He is supposed to be retired. We were talking about that, but like he said, he's not. So, again, I don't know if this is part of his job description or not, but we appreciate him coming on. He's with the North American Grouse Partnership. I actually met Todd at Pheasant Fest. He was next to the booth that we were, and we got to talking and was telling him about the trips that we had planned and how we might be going out to Wyoming to chase some sage grouse. And so after chatting with him, I was like, oh, we can get you to come on, and we're going to talk about the lesser prairie chickens, and all that information will be in this podcast of where they're currently at with that. But anyways, enough of me blabbing. Ted, if you want to introduce yourself, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to be here. I'm excited for your sage grouse hunting trip because nothing is more cool than that, I will say.
Yeah.
But the first birds my yellow lab ever retrieved were sage grouse.
Oh, nice.
Interestingly, before she retrieved a duck. So anyway, my name's Ted Cook, and I'm the executive director of the North American Grouse Partnership, grousepartners.org if you want more information. And we include in our work all 12 North American grouse species, but we focus on the 4 prairie grouse, which is greater prairie chickens, lesser prairie chickens, sharp-tailed grouse, and sage grouse, we include in prairie grouse. In particularly right now, where we're focusing our efforts is on the lesser prairie chicken, found in the southwestern Great Plains. That's western Kansas, western Oklahoma, western Texas, eastern New Mexico, and southeastern Colorado. And the reason we're focused on them is the southwestern Great Plains are the most imperiled of our imperiled grassland ecosystems. And that is evidenced by the fact that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is about to list the lesser prairie chickens under the Endangered Species Act. The species we used to hunt is being listed under the Endangered Species Act because of habitat loss. And so that's what we're here to talk about today, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
How, I guess, what has brought them to, you said habitat loss. Do you know, like, the amount of acres that have been lost through the years that have started to bring them to the conclusion that we're coming to, and what has stopped the hunting of them? And I guess how many years ago was that?
Well, that's a great question, and of course, I can't resist. So I was a biologist for the U.S. endangered species biologist for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for 30 years. So I'm authorized to tell this joke. Okay, but how many biologists does it take to change a light bulb?
Nick, I'll let you answer.
Okay.
I'll say 3. 1 to hold the ladder, 1 to climb the step, and 1 to put the light bulb in.
The answer is I need more data. Right? I mean,
yeah, don't know if it's an LED light bulb or a regular fluorescent light bulb.
Give me more information before we make a decision. Right? And so I can say that about lesser prairie chickens. It depends on where you want to start when, but the fact is, when settlers came, west across the southern Great Plains, and Native Americans were in the southern Great Plains, and fed themselves on lesser prairie chickens, and walked through the sea of grass that existed then, they never could have imagined the day when all that would be left of the prairies is small remnant patches, and all that would be left of lesser prairie chickens is an endangered species. I mean, think about that. Think about our predecessors who came before us and felt lost in the sea of grass with these chickens. And today, all we have left is a few postage stamps and an endangered species. So, whatever the numbers are, whatever numbers I tell you, somebody will say, well, that's not quite right. And, they may or may not be right, just like I may or may not be right. But there used to be millions of birds across tens, if not hundreds of millions of acres. Okay. And today we've got, 30,000, probably less now, birds across maybe 4 million acres. And so we've lost over 90% of the range in our head. Yeah, exactly. and this is not unique to just lesser prairie chickens. Heath hens were the prairie chicken of the East. They became extinct 100 years ago. Atwater's prairie chickens in coastal Texas are functionally extinct. The only place that they persist is in captivity. And we keep trying to put them out in the wild, and they don't make it because prairie grouse are very hard to reintroduce. You need a minimum population size that's enough for multiple leks to form and for their social groups to form over large areas. And once they're gone from the landscape, restoring them is extremely difficult. And so we've already lost the heath hen and functionally the Atwater's prairie chicken, which maybe someday we'll get back in the wild, but not today. Lesser prairie chickens are next. And you know what else is declining? Greater prairie chickens, sharp-tailed grouse, and sage grouse. All our prairie grouse are in decline. And this is a moment that the Grouse Partnership is trying to seize the opportunity to say, hey, hunting community, ranching community, agriculture community, Americans, let's wake up to this loss. I don't know if your listeners know, grassland ecosystems, prairies, are the most threatened ecosystem on the continent. No ecosystem more in peril. Well, and so you look at the history of settlement of North America, right? Our grasslands are kind of Great Plains, right? Central part of the U.S. extends north to Canada and south to Mexico. And so Iowa is 95% ag, right? I mean, corn. Where does corn come from? It comes from Iowa, right? So, and it used to be, go ahead.
I just said, yep.
Yeah. So it used to be that small ag operators were small enough and inefficient enough. There were hedgerows and spaces between fields that would grow pheasants and other upland game and quail. But now, large agribusiness has taken over. They've smoothed the landscape. The fields are forever wide, and there's fewer and fewer places for wildlife to live. And prairie grouse are really emblematic of that. And so, and then, like I said, lesser prairie chickens are farther down the road than anything but for heath hens and Atwater's prairie chickens, which again are extinct and functionally extinct. And so the Grouse Partnership is just passionate about this. We have just got to use this moment as a call to action to stop the loss of habitat from due primarily to agriculture. And this is getting back to your original question. I'm sorry it's taken so long, but you can tell I'm fired up about this. But agriculture has caused the most loss over time. More recently, energy development being oil and gas and then wind energy. Prairie grouse do not like tall structures. And the moment you put in a wind farm, those grouse are gone for miles around. And so those are the historic and ongoing threats. And then, other classic things, invasive species, loss of native grasslands, grasses and forests, urban and suburban development. It all adds up to habitat loss. And that's what threatens most species is habitat loss.
Yeah. I never, I didn't even think of the windmills. I didn't either. We were talking to a guy last week, and he mentioned, Minnesota has grouse, and basically every state around Iowa has a species of grouse in it. And then you have Iowa that has, God, you don't go to the western side of the state where it's more prairie-like, it's more flat out there. And there's freaking windmills. You drive at night and all you see is red blinking lights everywhere from windmills, and from what I know, the windmills, the amount of energy that they actually produce, the cost of what they are and whatnot is actually more expensive. But
I mean, gas isn't getting any fucking cheaper. We know that. So fuck.
I'm in all. When it comes to energy, I'm in all of the above. Right? I want gas in my car now, and I want renewable energy tomorrow. And we'll never get rid of gas. It's such a highly concentrated form of energy. It's going to be important for a lot of things. But we need to move towards more renewable sources, and wind energy is one of them. It's just what happens, and I speak of Atwater's prairie chickens on the coast of Texas. So there's a string of national wildlife refuges along the coast, some of which we're trying to bring Atwater's prairie chickens back. Wind energy developers look at those open grasslands that are not private land, that are near the coast, that have a lot of wind, and they say, what a perfect place to put our wind turbines. So that's exactly where Atwater's prairie chickens want to live. And so we can have wind energy and chickens too, but we just got to be smart about it. That's all.
Yeah. the placement and
Yep.
whatnot. It's almost like a partnership that you guys need to build with these wind energy corporations to help them understand where you guys are coming from, and then help them maneuver where they need to put the wind energy at and whatnot to still have habitat and sustainable life for the grouse and prairie chickens and whatnot. But
That's right. And wind energy developers are people too, right? Ag producers are people too. Oil and gas developers are people too. And so they don't hate grouse. They don't try to hurt. They just don't know any better. And it's because we don't do a good enough job communicating. Just what you said. That's exactly right. And so to try to get ahead of the curve, that's our challenge and our opportunity. And that's what the North American Grouse Partnership is trying to do.
for sure, yeah, and it seems like in a lot of organizations, the main partnership that you hear of is them working with farmers and ranchers and whatnot, and then you got to look at the broader spectrum of who else can you work with, to bring back habitat, because it's not just farmers and ranchers, like you said, and so I think that's super important to point out that there's other options out there to bring back habitat, and still produce energy and keep the species alive. And then, so are all grouse species native to America? I know, like, the pheasant was introduced, many years ago. Are like when I think yeah. So like the oh god, I'm drawing a blank on it. The sharp-tailed grouse, that is native to like the Dakotas, I believe, right?
Yeah, actually, it's native. I'm not sure how far south. I'll say probably into Nebraska, historically into Iowa, although they may not be there anymore. And then sharp-tailed grouse are actually native all the way up into northern British Columbia. In fact, there's sharp-tailed grouse native to Alaska. Yeah, really cool.
Dang.
Really interesting birds. And so all four of the prairie grouse species I mentioned are native to North America: sharp-tails, greater prairie chickens, lesser prairie chickens, and sage grouse. And then there's 12 other grouse species. Of course, ruffed grouse, spruce grouse, blue grouse, sooty grouse, which used to be the same and now split out the coastal or inland. And then a few ptarmigan species, and that's most of them that I can think of.
Ptarmigan's probably primarily in Alaska, isn't it?
Well, yeah, they are from Colorado north. In fact, there used to be a population in New Mexico. I'm not sure if there still is.
That's way south.
Yeah, believe it or not. Now, I'm not sure which of those have been introduced historically. I think New Mexico was, maybe Colorado was. And so ptarmigan that are native may not be until Montana north, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, they're a northern bird. You're exactly right. They're northern/high elevation. So, where they do occur in the continental U.S., they're in the way high.
Yep. Nice.
But then the introduced species, pheasants, chukar, Hungarian partridge, quail have been introduced to many places outside of their range, but they are native to North America.
Yep.
Of course, bobwhite quail have been on the decline for a long time. I think we all know that. If you're an upland fan. Scaled quail are doing okay in Southwest, and then oh gosh, I'm not going to say the name of the quail. Montezuma quail. It's not for sure about grouse, not quail, but anyway, there's a couple southwestern quail species that are cool.
Yeah. No, that's yeah. It's been interesting the past how many years, just the change in landscape and bird numbers, and it's awesome to see the organizations like you guys partnering up and trying to bring things back. And I mean that's what it's gonna take, is people passionate. Like obviously we can tell you are, and so let's go back to the lesser prairie chickens. You mentioned that they're going to be an endangered species here, potentially. And can we talk a little bit about that and what that means as a bird that's going on the endangered species? What's that? What's that look like?
So a year ago, around June 1st, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service proposed to list lesser prairie chickens under the Endangered Species Act as threatened in the northern part of the range, so I think Kansas, Oklahoma, and then endangered in the southern part, Texas, New Mexico, southeastern Colorado. And so the service is due to publish a new document any day now, probably in the next week or so. And they'll either finalize their proposed rule, which will list them as threatened and endangered in different parts of the range, or they'll do something different. They might list them all as endangered or all as threatened, or they might decide to not list lesser prairie chickens. My money is on them basically publishing a final rule that looks something, largely like the proposed rule. And so I think they will list lesser prairie chickens as threatened in the north and endangered in the south. But there's just no getting around. So the service actually listed the chicken back in 2012 or 13, and then industry groups sued and won, and the chicken was delisted. And then environmental groups sued the Fish and Wildlife Service again. The Fish and Wildlife Service, Department of Interior, gets sued more than any other department in the entire federal government, interestingly. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is one outstanding reason why. So they always get sued by both sides, right? So industry sued and won, and then environmentalists sued and won to relist the birds. And now the service is proposing to relist. So it's just crazy. But anyway, that aside, I expect in the next week or so that the service will list chickens under the endangered species act, threatened in the north, endangered in the south, whatever it ends up being. It's not that much.
What?
So what? Go ahead.
What's it look like for between threatened and endangered? How do they classify the difference?
Yeah. So great question. So there are 9 take prohibitions listed in the Endangered Species Act. There are things you cannot do. Take, pursue, wound, hunt, capture, trap, destroy habitat, blah, blah, blah. If you list a species as endangered, all 9 of those take prohibitions are implemented automatically. If you list a species as threatened, the service can then name which of the 9 take prohibitions apply and not apply the other ones. And so it's called to a 4D rule, Section 4D of the Endangered Species Act. It's arcane, but anyway. So, for example, the service proposed to not protect lesser prairie chickens in existing agricultural fields. Now, that confused a lot of people. They said, gosh, conversion to ag is one of the biggest threats to chickens. And the service did not say it's okay to convert existing prairie to ag. They said for ag fields that have already been converted, if chickens show up and you hit one with your combine, it's okay. And the reason for that is they don't want people, making their fields unfriendly. They're already converted, but sometimes chickens will, if they're growing corn, they're growing corn or whatever it is, right? So on the edges, they might sometimes use those ag fields. So that's kind of the difference between endangered. Threaten's a little more flexible.
That's a very good explanation. I had no idea what the difference. So currently, though, lesser prairie chicken we can't hunt, right?
We haven't been able to hunt lessers for at least 20 years, maybe longer.
So, what's the rule that was put in place, or why was that put in place so long ago, and now we're just getting to endangered and threatened?
That's what the environmentalists are asking. Why did it take so long?
I should have been an environmentalist. God dang it.
Yeah. Environmentalists see an Endangered Species Act listing as a tool, right, to force more conservation. And yeah, it can be that. The fact is that 95% of lesser prairie chicken habitat is on private land, and the Fish and Wildlife Service will not recover lesser prairie chickens through regulation. They don't have the interest, they don't have the staff, they don't have the authority, they don't have the legal leverage to compel landowners to. You can't take a landowner to court because they overgrazed their land, right? I mean, you don't have a dead chicken in your hand, and the U.S. Justice Department isn't going to prosecute a landowner for overgrazing. That doesn't happen. So the circumstances around that aren't really what's going to happen. So, um, and shoot, I started off on your question. I swore to myself I was going to get back to it, and I didn't.
That's fine. We always get lost in tangents, anyways. So.
That was important.
Yeah. No, I don't know if. Do you need me to ask the question again of what it was?
Yeah.
Basically, the question was, so it's been 20 years or so since we've been able to hunt them. Why are we just now getting to?
Yeah, and so this is important as well. This is why I wanted to get back to it. So it's been a state-managed species. Today, it's still a state-managed species, right? And so the states see chickens declining. The threat of a federal Endangered Species Act listing looms. The states don't like it because it takes away their management authority, right? States are in charge. Hey, we're in charge. We're the bosses, right? We don't want it listed under the ESA because we lose management authority. And so they stop hunting because they want to keep birds around. The problem is hunting is not the threat. Hunting is not the threat. The threat is habitat loss.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get more chickens by stopping hunting. It's still wise to stop hunting, right? At some point, you got to stop shooting them, right? But we're losing habitat. To this day, we're losing habitat. So the gap in time there is the states managing the species saying, hey, we're losing critters, we can't keep hunting them. Smart. But we're still losing habitat, and now we're losing more birds. And finally, the federal listing is compelled, and the states lose management authority, and we're down to less than 30,000 birds.
We had the Iowa DNR on, months ago. And he was telling us, even for like Iowa, that we've lost enough acres from like Illinois to the Nebraska side of Iowa in a thin line, which I don't know how many miles that is.
I think you said 3 miles wide.
Yeah, 3 miles wide, the whole state long. That's how much cover we've lost for our birds. It's just crazy.
Man.
It's crazy to think that. Like, that's a long ass ways.
Yeah. And that's, in that case, that's more industrial agriculture, right? More large scale, more efficient, those giant combines you see. That's what's doing that.
We were out in South Dakota this past year, and one of the farms we stopped at, the guy is actually, his family's originally from Iowa. It's kind of a cool story. North of where we live, and his great grandpa, where he lives at now, rode out there on a covered wagon. Whenever it was, I can't remember the year they said it was established, but his family has farmed that land since. And he was saying all the land that's coming up for sale around them, a corporate farmer from up in the Minnesota area is buying all the land. And he said
wiping everything out.
There's obviously no fence rows out in the Dakotas, out in those prairies, but all the trees and all the shrubs, anything you can think of is just getting cleaned out, and it's all making one big ass field basically.
Exactly right. That's your story, right? 3 miles wide, border to border. Yeah.
Yep.
That's it.
And it's just
that's Exhibit A.
Yeah, it's just crazy, and I think that we've put. How long has the North American Grouse Partnership been around?
21 years.
21 years. It's crazy to think, and maybe that's just naive on my part, or just not, since I live in Iowa and our main bird is pheasant, that all I think about when I think of organizations is like Pheasants Forever. And they put so much emphasis on the ringneck pheasant, and then you leave all these other game birds kind of out to dry. Because I think the pheasants use like the grouse habitat, but do grouse really use good pheasant cover?
The short answer is no. And I'll say Pheasants Forever is one of our strongest supporters and most important partners. Howard Vincent, CEO of Pheasant Forever, is a huge native grouse fan, and they're really doing a lot to help on this issue. But you're right, their focus, right, is in their name, right? It's pheasants. Now, pheasants use taller, thicker cover than most native grouse.
Yeah.
So that's the difference there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I just didn't. Like I said, it's such a new ball game when we talk about grouse and stuff, because we're from Iowa, we don't know that land, we don't know that that bird and what it takes, and it's just always been interesting to me recently, not always, just more recently, how like the western part of Iowa just doesn't have grouse. Like we don't have any, and not even in northern Iowa, the rough grouse where those timbers are, there's just nothing for grouse here. And it seems, it's like
I think there's a few, but we don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you might
find one lucky here and there, but we don't.
Yeah, but
we've heard that there's a few. That's all we've seen, or that's all we've heard of.
Yeah,
I should say.
But it's just crazy. All the states surrounding Iowa to the west have a grouse type of population, even Minnesota to the north of us.
So think about that. Think of the cultural implications of what you just said, which I totally agree with. I think you're exactly right. Native grouse have been gone from Iowa for so long that you guys who live there and are passionate about upland birds don't even know of your lost legacy. Yeah. It's been that long, right?
No idea.
I know. I've talked to my grandpa, and he's, back when he was younger, he remembers shooting a couple rough grouse, and he lives up northeast Iowa where it's hilly and trees. But you talk to the old timers, and they don't even have a grouse story from Iowa. Most of them don't. And I'm like, that's crazy, and some of them are 60, 70 years old. And I can't even, it's such a hard concept for me to wrap my head around, how we can have pheasants and some quail. I mean, we don't have a good number of quail.
We do not.
How all of these states around us can have multiple species of birds, and Iowa just doesn't have it.
And yet we seem to have the most food sources. I mean, if you look at crop-wise, we have a lot of good food sources.
Yeah, and that's, I was saying, that's why some ag field edges can be good for native grouse, but you have to have the native prairie still. You have to have the cover. You have to have that habitat. They can use those as food sources, but it's kind of like building a house with a kitchen and no bedroom and no bathroom. I mean, you can't live there.
Yeah.
Oh, nowadays that's all you get. Everything's so expensive. Just put your bed in the kitchen.
Yeah. So what are the type of, I mean, if you were thinking of how could you get grouse back to Iowa, just spitballing kind of, off the top of your head, what?
It is achievable. And so I'll give the example for lesser prairie chickens. The best, largest remaining intact habitat left for lesser prairie chickens is 30-year-old CRP land in western Kansas. On the northern end of the range, in fact, some argue it's even outside the historic range of lesser prairie chickens to the north of it. And yet that's where lesser prairie chickens are most successful, because 30 years ago, the NRCS put together a conservation reserve program package that interested enough landowners together contiguously that provided enough native grass, and they required the landowners to plant native grasses and forbs, critically important, native grasses and forbs, and chickens got the memo and showed up. And that's our largest, our greatest stronghold for lesser prairie chickens today. I'm confident that if you went to Iowa or anywhere else and you restored native prairie habitat, that you would get, and if it was adjacent to existing occupied habitat, that the greater prairie chicken or sharp-tailed grouse or whatever was native to that part of the state, they would get the memo.
So it wouldn't be something like, let's say they introduced, like in the southwest part of Iowa, because that'd kind of probably be closest to the northwest part of Kansas that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Let's say they reintroduce that type of native prairie grasses in a, I don't know, what's this? However many acres they did. Would it be something?
100,000.
How much?
100,000.
100. That'd
Sure.
be great. That'd be great. If they did that, would it be where the prairie chickens you think would actually find their way there, or would it be something where either DNR or a partnership like you guys or someone would have
Would you
to
have to plant them?
reintroduce them?
Would you have to plant them back out
Great.
there?
So great question. Great question. So as I said before, these prairie grouse have this complex social behavior, right? Where they have leks, right? I think we all know this. The males go to a relatively bare patch of ground in the middle of the prairie, and they dance and they strut and they sing, and the females come in and say, I'll have sex with you, and I'll have sex with you, right? And then they go off and have sex, and the females go lay their eggs, and that's it. And so it's geographically, that's what happens.
I believe
I
it.
might put a lek in my yard.
Yeah. And so it's geographically, it's very specific. Now you'll get birds trading among leks, but they're adjacent to whatever lek they started at, right? And so if you have habitat next to that, they'll bump from lek to lek to lek to, oh, look, here's an open piece of habitat. Here's some, shorter vegetation. We can lek here. So two birds start lekking and two more birds show up and a couple females show up. And before you know, you have a lek that's, 5 miles from the last one. And then it happens again 5 miles further out. And then it happens again 5 miles further out. That's kind of how they would occupy that habitat if they could. If they can't, if it's too far away, you have to reintroduce them. But think about this. You've got to reintroduce so many males and females all at once that one, they have to figure out how to make a living there, which means eating and avoiding predators. And they're very bad at figuring out both of those quickly. So when you reintroduce birds, many die fast. So you have to have even more in order to have enough of what's called a propagule, enough individuals to initiate that social behavior and have a couple of different leks where they can trade in between, and the females can visit one and then the other and can have sex and go off and lay their eggs and then go to the next, you know what I mean? And so that's why reintroducing prairie grouse is so hard.
Yeah. Do you think with the reintroduction, so it seems like a lot of people, not a lot of people, but people in Iowa, they'll raise pheasants, like homegrown pheasants, right? And then put them out on their property to try to get a pheasant habitat started. Do you think that's would be even possible with prairie chicken? Because I don't even know if that actually works that well or not. I've never looked at any studies.
Great question. So even there, Pheasants Forever will tell you that putting pheasants out on your property is a losing proposition unless it's a put and take situation, right? You put pheasants out, you go out within the week and shoot them so they're gone or dead. Getting wild pheasants to establish is hard. Now, we've been doing it for 150 years and it's worked and it's spread and so we're successful. But think of all the time and money and energy and effort it took to accomplish that. So we could do that with prairie grouse too, right? It's not that much of a leap. We do that with prairie grouse, but that's the kind of concerted effort that it would take.
Yeah, and you'd have to have someone willing to have that many acres to put into that type of native grasses.
Yeah.
Which
is it going to pay? And it's not. It won't pay.
Yeah.
Right. And 95% of the Great Plains are private owned. So, what is it going to take to incentivize landowners to want to do that?
Yeah. Because I'm guessing there's not so like Pheasants Forever has programs where you can enroll into a 10-year program of CRP grasses and whatnot. I'm guessing there's probably not a program of such in the prairies to do that for farmers to do that.
There are programs, like I said, CRP in Western Kansas 30 years ago did just that.
Okay.
So we've actually done this before using USDA Farm Bill conservation programs. And so and I believe me, I am no expert when it comes to farm bill programs. But my question that I've been asking USDA agencies lately is, can we just do that again? We were successful 30 years ago. Let's just do that again now, here, there, over
Yeah.
there.
I mean, that makes complete sense.
Yeah, and if they have to change the, payment per acre or whatever to
That's right.
go with what inflation is and all that stuff, then change that price and let's get to going.
Amen, brother. That's the biggest thing. You talk to landowners, that's the biggest impediment you just said.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, with the price of, I think corn's gone up, and whatnot, so I'm sure, you got to raise your prices to match that because they're not going to take out, take a lesser payment, I guess. They got families to feed.
They can't afford to. And they're making a living off there, feeding their family. They're sending their kids to college off there. You can't expect them to just, out of the goodness of their heart, donate their land to chickens,
Yeah. Especially the amount of land.
Right. Especially the hundreds of thousands of acres that it would take. That's exactly right.
You almost got to find that the guy that's 65 years old with no kids that's ready to retire. That it's like, I don't want to do this anymore, and you pay me this much for as long as I have it in there, then I'll gladly do that.
You'd be amazed at the number of landowners that say, look, I grow beef and I have a commercial market to monetize that so I can pay myself and make a living. If I could get paid to grow lesser prairie chickens, I'd do it in a heartbeat because I love native prairies. I love wildlife. I love native wildlife. I hate that lesser prairie chickens are about to be an endangered species. Pay me to grow lesser prairie chickens.
Yeah.
They really feel that way. I mean, because they can still grow cows. They're probably fewer cows. But if you pay them to grow lesser prairie chickens enough, and they can also get paid when they sell their cows, they'll do both. They will.
It covers that cost of the loss of less cattle.
It's such a fine line with farmers and that, and you got to find the right exact farmer that wants to do that, really.
And you'd be amazed how many there are. And just like the oil and gas guys aren't bad guys, right? The wind energy people aren't bad. Farmers aren't, and ranchers aren't bad either. It's just they've got to make a living. We would act the same way that we have got to produce the best income on our land that we can. And growing lesser prairie chickens is usually not that.
Yeah, I'm sure there's not a. The thing though, like you said, if the USDA would come back with what they did 30 years ago, pay them X amount per acre to have in this prairie grasses. It's less work for them once it gets established, right? They just got to plant it, and then 2, you have less work, but potentially the same amount of profit or income with less work overall because you might have less cattle, so you just have less things to do, I guess you could say, or less on your plate, right?
Yep.
And think about it this way. Ranchers don't just provide beef to our society. They provide healthy soils, healthy vegetation, clean water, clean air. They can even provide carbon sequestration. Prairies provide a lot of carbon sequestration, sometimes more than forests, because forests are so slow growing. Prairies are turn over much faster, right? But here's the problem. The only thing where there's a commercial market is for the cows. We don't yet have a commercial market for carbon. We don't yet have a commercial market for wildlife habitat. And so then we have these programs, like Farm Bill programs, that are designed to pay ranchers for exactly that, right? Dust Bowl came along, unhealthy soil, bad watersheds, unclean air. Hey, let's develop these Farm Bill conservation programs to pay these landowners to do a better job taking care of those resource values, because all Americans value clean air and clean water and clean, healthy soils, right?
Yeah.
And we seem to have faded away from that more and more, and we're failing to hit the mark well enough, like we did 30 years ago in our lesser prairie chicken example. So we need to pay them for those products. They're not just growing beef; they're growing all these other things for our benefit.
Yeah. What's the process for getting that type of bill established, or I don't even know if you want to call it a bill, through the USDA and whatnot, what they did.
So here, especially if you are from a prairie state, from an ag state like Iowa or any other, Central Plains state, but any state, please, Michigan. I think the current chair of the Senate Ag Committee is from Michigan, Stabenow, I think. Please reach out to your elected representatives and urge them to pay landowners for all of the products they grow, not just beef, and to pay them adequately. Pay them adequately. We want prairie grouse. We want clean water and clean air and healthy soils and carbon sequestration. Do the math, pay what it takes for them to be ranchers of not only cows, but all those other values.
Yeah. And you think about it, if you're able to do that, eventually it's somehow going to come around and help pay for itself through, licenses, I guess, for hunting, through, whatever
They
else.
could charge for access. I mean, imagine if you were the only place in Iowa where you could hunt greater prairie chickens. Imagine what that landowner could get per hunter per day, right? I mean, people, yeah. I did a hunt in Eastern Oregon, just outside of Boise. I live just north of Boise. This winter, I don't know, how much did it cost me? Does $150 sound right for a day of shooting pheasants, or $100 or whatever it was? Yeah, I mean, imagine if you had a lesser prairie chicken experience, you could get twice that.
Oh yeah.
Imagine if you're that landowner. Imagine how valuable that would be, and you're still growing cows.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, that's a good way to look at it. When you think of a rancher, you think of someone who's riding on horseback and sending their cattle down the road at whatever weight. You don't even think of what they can do for the landscape and what they can do to help wildlife and just even the overall green energy for the world, or the U.S. I guess is what we're focused on. But,
yeah, and there's places for that. There's places where that can happen. Like most of Iowa is a great place right now to do not hurt any native prairie grouse.
Yeah,
I hate to say it, but, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Smart about that.
It's just it's so interesting, when you dive into these type of topics. Is I would know nothing about it if we didn't do this podcast and didn't meet guys like you and reach out to these organizations. I think it's awesome to get the word out, about what you guys are doing and how as hunters and conservationists how we can help, and if you have family farms and whatnot, what you could do to help that out. But
and thank you for doing this podcast and for letting me join, because it's opportunities like this where we all learn from each other, right? And think bigger than we knew how to think, right? I mean, again, from Iowa, your legacy of prairie grouse is so long lost that it's hard to imagine, right?
It is.
I mean,
it'd be awesome to find. I don't even know if you'd find someone that's ever shot a prairie chicken, in Iowa.
Yeah.
It's absolutely crazy. So since we're on the prairie chickens and the birds, do you got any good stories of hunting them that you'd like to tell us? Sage grouse.
Yeah. So, sage grouse are my jam. I mean, and I haven't killed a lot, but they're just so magnificent. They're a big bull sage grouse or cock, is probably half the size of a turkey, and when they get up, they thunder. And so
that's what everybody's been saying. You'll know what it is when it gets up.
That is exactly right. There will be no doubt in your mind, should I pull the trigger? Oh yeah, this is it. So, but they're just so magnificent. And seeing them on the lac, I mean, all the prairie grouse are awesome, but sage grouse, they have these magnificent yellow air sacs and a big white bib and trimmed with black, and they just look insanely magnificent. Like they look like royalty out there on the lac strutting males. If you ever get a chance to go to a sage grouse lac and watch the males in April, and anywhere in sage grouse country, I want you to listen to their call and tell me if I'm wrong. But hunting them is just such an experience. They're and limits are down. I think limits are down to one a day now in Idaho, because Western prairie chickens, they stopped hunting 20 plus years ago, right? Sage grouse, we're down to one grouse a day in Idaho, and I'm afraid that in the next 10 years that'll be zero grouse, and we won't be hunting sage grouse in Idaho anymore because they're going away. Why? habitat loss.
That is
So
crazy.
hunt them while you can. Yeah, because hunting is not the threat. Hunting is not the threat. Just all these prairie grouse. Hunting is not a threat. In fact, it's a conservation opportunity. And so hunt them while you can. But you'll know when they're getting up, and they're just it's a take pictures because you'll want to remember that. You'll want to tell your grandkids about the time you're able to hunt sage grouse.
Yeah, that's one. So I wear a GoPro when we hunt, and sometimes I feel like an idiot wearing it because it's like, oh, you're that guy that films, and puts it on YouTube and whatnot. But I'm like, it's also now out there. So when I'm 50 years old and 60 years old or whatever, if YouTube's still around, I don't know if it will be, but it'd be awesome to if I ever have kids or grandkids or whatnot that can be like, look at this back when I was, early 30s out here, and if we go to Wyoming to shoot sage grouse and whatnot.
Problem is, you can't hit shit, so we'll have it on camera, but it'll be flying away.
Hey,
there's something you can hit a sage grouse.
yeah. If I miss a sage grouse, then we got some real issues from the sounds.
I've missed sage grouse, but they're a great opportunity for you to have a second or third shot. So
yeah, are they slower when they get up, or they bust out?
They're surprisingly quick for how big they are, and they can get down range. If they got the wind at their back, right, they can disappear in a heartbeat. But typically, like you're hunting into the wind with your dogs, a sage grouse gets up, and you can. In fact, one of my times, I remember I was hunting sage grouse in Nevada, and I had my dog. I was with my yellow lab. This is one of the first birds he ever treated sage grouse. And this grouse got up 10 yards away, and I thought I took my talon, mounted my gun, and laying my cheek on the stock and put the bead right below its head. But man, when I pulled that trigger, there was we all had it, right? Boom! This explosion of feathers.
God, you sound like Nick.
Yeah. I was not able to eat that sage grouse. So,
happens every once in a while to me.
Yeah. So give them time. If they're getting up into the wind to try to fly away from you, give them time.
Yeah, no, that it'd definitely be an awesome bird to shoot at and to see. And like I said, everybody's like, oh, just wait till they get up. And like you said, have that thunder when they bust out of the sagebrush.
It's a magnificent. It's a lot, and the country is so beautiful. The high plains, sagebrush plains of Wyoming or Idaho, Montana, or Utah. It's just usually you got a mountainous backdrop, and it's an adventure. It's an adventure, and you'll relish that. I'm so excited for you.
Yeah,
I want to hear how it goes.
Yeah, no, we're excited too.
Do you still hunt with dogs?
Yeah, I've just my lab. I'm about this close to getting an upland dog. Not sure what kind, but now that I'm retired, quote unquote. Supposed to have more time to hunt, so I promised myself I'd get an upland dog, but I don't get my lab out enough. Anyway, wine.
Yeah.
So I retired. I was a federal employee of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and when I had worked on sage grouse and lesser prairie chickens, and so the Grouse Partnership came and said, "Hey, we'll be our executive director." And of course, I said, "No, thanks." Now here I am. Right. So it's a part-time position, but especially right now, it's becoming more than part-time every day. And on top of that, my wife and I moved back to Idaho. We raised our kids here, and we just built our forever home and are busy living happily ever after. And
that's awesome.
I was just out there killing spotted knapweed and bush skeleton weed and thistle. And anyway, all of a sudden, I'm trying to be a practicing agriculturalist at the same time. So.
Yeah, you're a busy plate for a half-retired man.
Yeah.
Or should we say
sure it's fun.
Yeah. Nope, that's awesome. Yeah, well, Ted, we definitely appreciate you coming on and talking about
thank you very much.
lesser prairie chickens, what the North American Grouse Partnership is about, and just everything else. It was great to learn about it, and definitely opens our eyes up to more than what's always seems to be right in front of us and whatnot. So again, thank you. We appreciate it. We'll definitely stay in touch, and if there's things that we can do to help spread the knowledge with our platform that we have and whatnot, definitely let us know and we can try to help out where we can.
So if I can just mention two things in closing, that would be very helpful if your listeners would be willing to take a little time. One, contact your congresspersons and senators and urge them to pass the Recovering America's Wildlife Act, or RAWA. It'll take excise taxes from oil and gas development and give them to states to conserve non-game species. So for lesser prairie chickens, states used to be able to spend a lot of money on them. When they could no longer hunt them, they became a non-game species. States couldn't spend as much money. RAWA, Recovering America's Wildlife Act, would empower those states to start spending more money conserving those species in their habitats. Secondly, the North American Grassland Conservation Act has not yet been introduced to Congress, but key partners of ours, like Pheasants Forever, National Wildlife Federation, and others, Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, are advocating for development of and passage of the North American Grasslands Conservation Act. Again, prairie ecosystems, the most threatened on the continent. We have to have this. Your listeners may be familiar with the North American Wetlands Conservation Act, which has been incredibly successful. In fact, of all the groups of birds across North America, grassland birds have declined more than any other group of birds. The only group of birds to not decline over the last 50 years are wetland birds or waterfowl. Isn't that interesting?
That's
the reason
crazy.
why?
Yeah.
NACA, North American Wetlands Conservation Act. We need a North American Grasslands Conservation Act to do the same thing for our native grasslands. So please contact your congresspersons and senators. Support RAWA and support North American Grasslands Conservation Act.
Yeah, for sure. That goes right back to the hunters aren't the ones that are causing the numbers drops, right?
That's right.
With the waterfowl,
Yeah,
you see
yes.
stacks of birds, right? That people
The
are dropping.
success of waterfowl conservation is driven by hunters, right?
Yeah.
Duck stamp dollars. Hunters did that to themselves. Pittman Robertson dollars on hunting gear. Dingle Johnson Act dollars on fishing gear. Hunters and anglers are the ones who pay for the conservation in this country. And that's why RAWA is so important, Recovering America's Wildlife Act, which has already been passed through committee in both houses of Congress. It only needs to be voted on by the full Senate and the full House, because it would take dollars not from hunters to pay for these non-game species.
Yeah.
It's very important that we pass that this session. It has to happen this session.
Nice. Yeah, we'll definitely mention that when we put the description out and everything. We'll include it in there. If you have a link or something to those at
Okay.
all, can you?
All right.
Well, I guess I can probably look them up too, but
I will. Yeah, I will. Let's see. I'll shoot you an email with whatever I find real quick. That's a good question. I'm confident that the groups advocating for this have a website for that, but to be honest,
Yeah.
I don't know it.
and if they
But,
do, I'll put it in the description of this
Yeah.
episode. That way, it's in there.
Yeah.
We can point right to
So
it.
I'll track that down and get it to you.
Okay, awesome. Again, we appreciate it. It was great.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking
Thanks,
the
Teddy.
time out of your busy schedule, and we hope your new forever home and homestead, and eventually when you get a new pup, everything goes good. So.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you, sir.